Welcome everyone to Kubernetes SIG Apps for February 13th, 2017. My name is Matt Farina. I'll be wrangling this today. Michelle is and should not be on. She's off at something, so if you see her jump on, kick her off. She can watch it later. Today, we have an agenda, and I will go ahead and share it in chat here. And this should link you directly to today's. If anyone has additional items to talk about, or one of our demos popped off, if you have a demo that you would like to do or you're prepared to do or something you want to share off the cuff, we do have a little bit of time. Feel free to pop in and do that. So that's the additional items. So the first thing, we have a few announcements. The first one we have here is we have a 1.6 doc for your contact info. If you're involved in the meeting or need to do report up scrums or any of those things, so if you're responsible for an area like shards or stateful sets or those kinds of things, if you could please fill in your details. And I just dropped that link into chat. And it's the second. It looks in chat like they're kind of merged together. But if you can put your name there, that'll help Michelle and I and the PMs just keep track, notify folks, know who's in the meetings to report on things, stuff of that nature. The second thing in the announcements that I'd like to do is congratulate Helm. It has officially graduated from Kubernetes Incubator. So yay, big round of applause for graduation. I know it came out beginning of last week, almost a week ago, but this is our first meeting since then. And so Helm is an official Kubernetes non-incubator project. Congratulations, Matt, and everyone else who works on Helm. And then the third announcement is this is the last day to complete the SIG survey to help us improve what we're doing. Michelle has a survey going on where she wants to just get your opinions, get your impressions, so that way we can fit that back into the loop and take that feedback and use it to try to improve your experience here. So there's another link that I just dropped into chat, which is also in the meeting minutes. If you could take just a few minutes and fill that out and help us improve the SIG. And so with that, we'd like to get on to a few of the Kubernetes core stand-ups just to let us know what's going on and how things are going. And the first one we have listed on here is stateful sets. Do we have anyone who can talk about stateful sets on today? If we don't,
I can.
Oh, who is it?
I can give a quick high level if nobody else who's been making changes is on.
Sure. Go ahead.
So there's been a couple of refactors going into stateful sets to ensure that some problems people found during the 1.5 release and in use are addressed. Things like deadlocking when pods fail in a weird way. So that went in just a little while ago. There's also additional tests being added, and there's been some discussion around adding a burst mode as an alpha flag to stateful sets that would allow them to create all pods at once versus going through the simpler startup flow. And so there's discussion happening on that and an issue right now. I don't have it open, but I'll paste it into the chat afterwards, as well as taking more feedback from use cases. I know that Eric and the guys on his team had been gathering more input as well.
All right. Thank you, Clayton.
Hi, Clayton. This is Dilip. I've got one question. I mean, if I have to contribute or look through all the use cases and add more use cases from our side, what would be the best place to look at? Is that a document that's like a running document or something?
So a lot of this is being tracked. There was a document for improvements to stateful sets. I have no idea where it went. I haven't looked at it in a couple of weeks. Generally, the way that a lot of these are being handled is if people are identifying specific issues that make it difficult opening issues. I do not have a document handy for stateful sets as things that people wanted to do next, mostly because it's being handled as issues at this point.
Thank you.
And I think this SIG is like coming into the SIG and asking on the SIG apps mailing list is also something. If you have use cases that you'd like to see solved, the SIG apps mailing list is the place to discuss those, certainly, before you open an issue.
Hello.
All right.
I haven't. Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, I have an issue. I'm not sure if I can discuss about it. To give a high-level idea about it is that if I have to configure an application which is got shards, Redis has got multiple shards. MySQL could have shards too. Then for those type of applications, if I scale down, then the shards need to be properly shut down. So how is that sort of use cases being handled currently?
So there's an issue open for that, which is shard assignments, which there's been some discussion about this. It's not a feature in Kubernetes, but there's kind of a desire to keep that separate from stateful sets. However, today, if you need to do rebalancing around the stateful set, most people are implementing that as a higher level controller on top of a stateful set. So before scaling down or before getting rid of an instance, doing the rebalance and then marking the pod for deletion. So I know that the etcd operator has some logic around this. It's not using stateful sets today, although it had been discussed. I've seen people who have written Redis controllers that directly program into Redis. They're not actually using stateful sets today either for that. So there's kind of an ongoing evolution where this isn't something that stateful sets support today, and the goal was to get to a point where that could be built around stateful sets versus in stateful sets. So the answer is no magic today.
But would you like a proposal to bring that sort of ability inside stateful set?
I think that would be a good discussion. I think there's a couple of issues open already. Let me, I'll copy in the issue and then you can comment on them and we can, move it to that list.
That would be great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right. Anything else on stateful sets?
One quick comment, Dilip, I don't know if, I'm sort of new to this group, but I don't know if you've given them an update or any indication of the work that's going on with federated stateful sets?
I do not have it.
No, Quentin. We thought that we would first publish the design document and then talk about it, but I have not given him any update.
Okay, just a heads up then. I guess we have some design work in progress at the moment. It's nearing a point where we might be able to put it out for broader review around federating stateful sets across multiple clusters. And yeah, so if anyone's interested, you can reach out to either Dilip or myself and we can get you involved in the very early draft there. And hopefully in the next week or two, we'll have something for the broader community.
Thank you. And when you have that, if you could send it out to the SIG Apps mailing list, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, can do.
Thank you. Anything else on stateful sets? All right, we'll move on to daemon sets. Do we have somebody on today to talk about daemon sets?
Yes, hi, it's Łukasz. I'm the author of a pull request for daemon set updates. I pushed the pull request last week. I'm posting a link to the pull request on the chat. So please take a look and review. I already got a lot of review, so thank you for it. And it's, I think it's in good shape. There are some open issues still, but I think everything should be okay. Maybe some of the reviewers can share some thoughts.
All right, so we've got a daemon set PR ready for review. Thank you. All right, then the next one we have is for deployment and replica sets. Do we have anybody on to talk about those?
Yeah, so this is Michalis from the OpenShift team. There's no specific update apart from the fact that there's ongoing discussion for changing the way that we calculate hashes, which is the names for new replica sets. Probably this week I'm gonna set up a proposal for that. I'm not sure if it's going to land for 1.6. That's it for deployments, I guess.
Okay, thank you. The next thing we have on the agenda today is a demo. We've got Saad on to talk about storage classes and dynamic provisioning. Are you on?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. The floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see that?
I can see it.
Cool, let's get started. So this is going to be an overview of storage classes and dynamic provisioning. This is a feature that was introduced a few releases ago. It's headed into GA in 1.6. And let's get started here. So I'm going to start off with a quick recap of how to do basic, how to specify a volume in your workload, how to use it, and then I'll introduce PVPVCs to kind of set the context for where dynamic provisioning fits in. And so this is the basic, the classic example of using a GCEPD, right? You've got a replica set definition, and inside the replica set spec, you define as part of the pod template what volume you want to use and how you want that volume to be mounted. And in this particular case, we're explicitly specifying a GCE persistent disk named Panda disk, and we're mounting it into a location called /data inside the containers inside the pod. You know, the magic here is Kubernetes takes care of mounting and attaching and everything for you. But there's a problem here, and I love to show off this picture because it kind of really makes it clear in my head what Kubernetes does. And to me, what Kubernetes does is it acts as an abstraction layer above what used to be a bunch of different cluster implementations. Kubernetes kind of takes all that gunk underneath away and just gives you a nice, consistent interface to be able to deploy your applications against. And so in order to do that, what you want ideally is the API that you expose to Kubernetes, the configuration that you deploy against Kubernetes should be portable. But if you noticed in that last step, we were specifying GCE persistent disks in our replica set. That meant that if we took that that replica set definition and we dropped it on an Kubernetes cluster running on Amazon, for example, it wouldn't work anymore because there's no GCEPDs available. So to kind of address that issue, what we did was introduced the concept of PVPVC, which you guys are already familiar with. What this did was it decoupled the consumption of storage from the actual implementation of storage. So you have a PV object which represents some piece of storage that's available for users on the cluster to use. It is created by the cluster administrator ahead of time. So in our example, what I would do as a cluster administrator is go in and create a couple of persistent volumes ahead of time. In this case, Panda disk and Panda disk 2, specify what their capacity is, what their access modes are, and when I create them, they're now available for use. Then as a user of storage, as somebody who wants to deploy a workload, when I decide that I need to use storage, instead of creating my workload first, I create my request for storage first. And the request for storage in this case is the persistent volume claim. And the persistent volume claim basically specifies the minimum requirements that I have for storage. In this case, I'm requesting 100 gigs. So after I create this, my request is going to get bound to the available 100 disk PV. And now in my replica set, in my workload definition, what I can do is specify the persistent volume claim instead of the exact disk that I want to use. And the beauty of this is that the user-facing configs now are portable. I can go ahead and drop this config on Amazon or some other cluster which doesn't have GCEPDs and have it still work as long as there's some storage available. But there was still a little crufty step in there, which was having to manually provision your disks ahead of time. That kind of sucks, especially now that we're in this cloud-native world where you could dynamically provision, you can automatically provision storage on demand. on GC, on Amazon, etc. You could call out to the Cloud API and say, give me a volume of this size, and have it within a matter of seconds. And so it would be really neat to have Kubernetes integrate into that. And that was kind of the key in bringing this feature to light. So dynamic provisioning and storage classes will allow storage to be created on demand. It eliminates the need for the storage administrator the cluster administrator to have to pre-provision that storage. It'll get provisioned automatically when the user requests the storage. And another beautiful thing is the way that this feature was designed is we didn't want to, what you'll notice is that lots of different storage systems provide a bunch of different knobs and parameters that you can tweak that are very specific to their storage provider. And what we didn't want to do was try to get into the business of trying to enumerate every single possible knob that every single storage provider could support in the Kubernetes API, because that was a game that we would never win. So the way that we designed it is have an opaque pass-through. So volume plugins can expose what set of parameters an arbitrary set of parameters that they support, and then cluster administrators can set those parameters as an arbitrary blob that gets passed through to the plugins on dynamic provisioning. That way Kubernetes doesn't have to be aware of those. So again, this feature was introduced in Kubernetes in 1.2 and promoted to beta in 1.4 and planned GA in 1.6. So let's jump into what it actually looks like. So to start with, what you do is you create a storage class definition. The storage class is basically a way for a cluster administrator to say, let me enable dynamic provisioning. Here are the different types of storage I want available, and when they are invoked, here is what I want to happen. So in this case, as a cluster administrator, I want to expose two types of storage. I want slow storage and fast storage. I mean, these are arbitrary labels. I can call them whatever I want. But in this case, this would be descriptive enough, so I'm going to call them slow and fast. They're both going to invoke the GCE persistent disk volume plugin, and they're going to pass in the parameter type. The slow one is going to result in a standard spinning disk, and the fast one is going to result in an SSD. So once I create these API objects, they're now available for use by users of the cluster. And so as a user of the cluster, now when I go to request my storage, I again create a PVC, a persistent volume claim. But this time I have an additional annotation in my claim, which in the case of beta, we have volume.beta.kubernetes.io/storage class. I can specify the storage class that I want to use for dynamic provisioning. So when that annotation is present and that persistent volume claim object is created, Kubernetes triggers the dynamic provisioning flow, and it will call out, it'll go find that storage class, look at what volume plugin it's pointing to, call out to that volume plugin's create command, pass through those parameters. Once the volume is created, it'll create a persistent volume object automatically to represent that new piece of storage and bind it back to this persistent volume claim. And once that binding happens, then the user can go ahead and use it just as they would a standard PVC by sticking it in their replica set or pod definition as a persistent volume claim. So that pretty much wraps it up. That's dynamic provisioning storage classes. What's next for the storage SIG? What we're working on for this quarter and pretty much the next good part of the year. Local storage, something that's been asked for a lot. This is an effort that we're finally getting to design in this quarter and hopefully start implementing in subsequent quarters. Out-of-tree volume drivers is something that's been asked for a lot, and there's a major effort underway to make this happen and make sure that we align with other orchestration frameworks as we do this. Containerized mounts was something of a challenge for a while because what we realized is that operating systems tend to differ a lot, and what you think may be available may not necessarily be available. So, for example, when we revved the We changed the underlying base image for GC, GKE, and it no longer contained the BlusterFS mounting tools. We realized this is something that can happen a lot, so we need a standard way to be able to fix this, and having those tools containerized and available to Kubernetes kind of solves that problem. So that's something that we're going to continue to drive forward. Snapshotting is something that we're starting to look at. This is something that we want to expose in the API. We think there's some value to it. There's some new volume plugins coming down the line and some metrics work. And of course, storage classes are going to GA. We'd love for more folks to get involved with this storage special interest group. Here's the information. We have bi-weekly meetings Thursdays. Our next meeting is this week, Thursday. And that's it. Back to you, Matt.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Sure.
Yeah. How do flex volumes fit into this? Because I'm a bit confused about that.
Yeah, so flex volumes were a way for us to give an escape hatch to folks who wanted to do out-of-tree volume plugins. Right now, basically all volume plugins must have their code checked into the Kubernetes core and are compiled and built into the primary Kubernetes binaries. This is something that a lot of storage vendors have been complaining for a long time. So our quick and dirty solution for that was to create a volume plugin called Flex, which is an exec-based model. In the volume definition, you specify what driver you want to use, and when Flex is invoked, it goes out and looks at a particular location on the node on the node machine and looks for a shell script or a executable that matches that name and uses it to fulfill the functionality of mount and unmount. And so the iteration of, or the version of Flex that currently exists was written, I think, way back in 1.2, and it only exposes two of the internal API commands, which are mount and unmount. It doesn't expose attach or detach, and it doesn't expose create and delete, which are the dynamic provisioning commands. Moving forward, what the dynamic provisioning folks decided to do was come up with a different way to expose dynamic provisioning out of tree rather than go through flex volumes. If you look up I could find a link later and post it in, but it's out of tree dynamic provisioning. I'll find the link and post it. But basically what it allows you to do is through an annotation, you specify another, my understanding is it's another controller that sits there and just listens for PVC requests with a certain annotation. When they exist, it'll go ahead and trigger the dynamic provisioning process for that particular plugin. Moving Flex forward, this quarter we're going to add attach and detach for 1.6. Beyond that, I'm not sure whether we're going to expose create or delete in it. Flex in its current form is probably not what is going to be our ultimate out-of-tree solution. That question is kind of being debated and designed at the moment. And I think we're going to take a lot of the learning from Flex, but it'll ultimately be something different. And Flex has always been advertised as alpha, so hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it just seems like there's that big disconnect between storage class and then actually enabling flex volumes without jumping through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, I mean, flex volumes honestly was never intended to be a production solution, but I think what we've learned is that it's starting to be used as such. So,
yeah, you don't want to be necessarily limited to what the cloud provider is offering in storage drivers within Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So the out of tree it's important.
Yep.
So I had a sort of tangentially related question, which is in on-premise kind of environments, we quite often see situations where you don't have a single, essentially, storage provider for a given cluster, but you might have a whole bunch of file servers or storage servers, and not all of the nodes are connected to all of those servers. So you might have multiple SANs, for example. And so there's a need to be able to manage that kind of situation, which kind of looks fundamentally different from your typical public cloud provider, which has, one kind of block store service, and you just create whatever you need there. Yeah. And everything is implicit. All virtual machines are implicitly connectable to that storage stuff. Do you guys have any thoughts or work for supporting those kinds of environments where there are multiple storage pools, if you like, and multiple storage networks which may be connected to different pools and different nodes, etc.? And there's an impact on scheduling there, obviously.
Yeah. So I think the baby steps towards that are going to be the local storage discussions the designs that are currently underway. What we've realized is that a lot of, especially on-prem folks, have very beefy machines with a lot of storage attached locally to the same machines, and they want to be able to have some sort of way to favor where their workloads end up. And if you have a workload that's using storage on node A, it should end up landing on node A, and there should be some sort of data gravity. So local storage, the design is underway right now, kind of is working towards that. But I think what you're asking for is a little bit different, which is you have a larger cluster which you can deploy your compute to anywhere. CPU and memory is available equally everywhere, but storage is not necessarily portable across the entire cluster. You may have it available in some parts of the cluster. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the sort of canonical example is a data center might have, a bunch of racks, and each rack might have rack local storage. And there's, implicitly a SAN in each rack, which connects all of the nodes in that rack to that storage. Yeah. And then you might have some, external storage systems, an EMC box or a NetApp box or whatever, or multiple of them. And then each one of those has a SAN associated with it, or, maybe associated with more than one SAN. And those SANs are not connected to all the nodes. You might have either a subset of nodes in each rack attached to each SAN or something like that. I mean, I'm sort of, waving my hands a bit here. The model's actually not as complicated as it sounds. But the bottom line is you have more than one storage network and more than one logical pool of storage associated with each network. And not all nodes are associated with all of the networks.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it might be worth at least bearing some of that stuff in mind in the context of local storage, because, it's kind of a generalization of the fact that, that piece of storage is not available to all nodes. Local storage is a very specific case where it's only available to one node, whereas this is a slight generalization of that.
Yeah. And I think this is the second time I've actually heard of this. eBay brought up exactly the same thing a couple of weeks ago. So you're right. This is something we'll keep in mind.
Yeah, there's a buzzword floating around these days. I think they call it hyper-converged computing, where, you don't buy a machine, you buy a rack which has got servers and storage in it.
Yeah. Interesting enough, I think Eric Toon's advice there was you can't optimize you can't have your scheduler optimize for every given parameter. There needs to be some parameter which is a given. So if you're so in the Google DCs, I think, for example, the network is thought to be essentially an unlimited quantity, and that makes life a lot easier for the scheduler to make other assumptions. And if you constrain that as well, which is the case when your backbone is not strong enough to, have network storage running over it, that makes things more challenging. So, but definitely we need to do more brainstorming around this.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have one quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so the quick question is, can the storage class be assigned to the normal persistent volume? So I have a cluster which doesn't have dynamic persistent volumes provisioning, but I have some predefined normal persistent volumes. And can persistent volume claims use the storage class system that you showed?
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand your question. You already have an existing pool of PV objects, and you want the dynamic provisioning mechanism to be able to pick at those first.
Yeah, exactly. So I can have, for example, 2 fast and 1 slow persistent volumes, and persistent volume claims can then pick based on these annotations. I'm trying to remember, but I believe the way that the algorithm is written is it will try to look at the annotation, storage class annotation on PV objects. And if there's one that already exists and is available, it'll match it. Don't quote me on that, try it out. But I believe that was what we were originally intending the design to be. It's recorded anyway, but thank you. I will try. Thanks.
Cool.
All right, thank you. Any final questions before we move on to the next topic? All right, so with that, we have a few more stand-ups for some of the other projects going on. And the first one that I have on the list here is Helm, the newly graduated Helm. Matt, are you on?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
All right. Yeah, so the last few weeks have been really great for us. We were the first project to graduate from incubator to a full Kubernetes project. That was fun. It was quite an experience, honestly. And I'm trying to work on a blog post to sort of explain how the project grew through that process and why I think it's been a really good process for us. But, you know, this week our attention is turned to the 2.2.0 release of Helm. I've just started working on some of the release notes. The official release date is going to be tomorrow. Happy Valentine's Day. And I started working on the release notes and was really struck by the fact that this release has marked a very, very interesting trend in the community, which is that we are now, you know, for many releases, it has been a core team of between 3 and 5 contributing the vast majority of the PRs. Things are really starting to turn in this case. So we've been really excited to see lots and lots of PRs coming in from the community. I don't have a total count yet. But that's just really exciting for us. The community really is growing on pace with what we would really hope to see in a successful open source project, and that's been really encouraging to us. So tomorrow, look out there for the 2.2.0 release. After that, you know, we'll switch focus for a couple of weeks on making sure that we don't need another patch release, and then we'll be off on the 2.3 roadmap. The big features for 2.2.0 right now, there are a whole bunch, actually. The one that we were considering sort of our headline feature is the one that Michelle has been working on for quite a while, which is the introduction of a framework for running chart verification tests inside of your cluster. But there have been several other big PRs that have made their way in. There will be lots of improvements for chart developers and for operators. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Matt? Great. The next one that's on the lineup is charts. Do we have anyone here to talk about charts?
Yes. Thanks, Matt.
Thank
so chart repo update. We've been trialing working a different way to actually get PRs merged in. So we published about a week ago a review process, which is using GitHub labels. I'll go ahead and post it in the chat if anybody's interested. But basically what we do is we take a bunch of PRs and focus on them for a week and then do a stand-up internally between all the chart maintainers, and that's been working out okay so far. So if you put in a PR and you see it get plucked up into a milestone, that means we're going to be working on it for that week. Currently at about 74 PRs, most of them are actually just fixes. The charts are getting quite good now. Keep the contributions coming, and we're always looking for maintainers. So if anybody's interested in becoming a chart maintainer, feel free to get your hands dirty or reach out to either myself. I'm at Levo in Slack. And any questions, feel free to approach any of us in the Helm Slack channel. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on charts? All right. Then the next one on the list here is we have Compose. Do we have anyone on to talk about Compose?
Yep. So if you guys could hear me, I'm Charlie from Red Hat. So I'm one of the maintainers for Kcompose. Compose, Kcompose, everyone calls it differently. Anyways, so we did do a release 17 days ago. It was one of the most, it was 0.2 release of Kcompose, something like 196 commits since the last release. So we're pretty proud about that. We knocked out a ton of bugs, cleaned up everything, including CLI parameters, checking out the checking validation for arguments. We switched from your fave CLI to Cobra, the SPF 13 Cobra. So that really helped in terms of developments and getting a lot of new features put in. We added batch completion support, which is great. Switched to outputting YAML instead of JSON by default. Yeah, so let me quickly show. Hopefully this doesn't make your guys' screens go full screen. One sec. If you guys can see it.
I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So just want to give a quick rundown in terms of development and future development for Kcompose. If you don't know what Kcompose is, it's basically a conversion tool for converting your Docker Compose file to Kubernetes artifacts. So we take a Docker Compose file here, just Redis master, Redis slave, and the guestbook demo. So you can do compose convert, and ta-da, you have all your files. I'm not going to go too much into this because this is obviously just the stand-up compose up, and it deploys on Kubernetes. There you go. It's starting to come up. Anyways, so that's Kcompose in a nutshell. We did outputting by YAML by default. I like how Helm has come out of the Kubernetes incubator because we actually convert to charts as well. Anyways, so we added OpenShift support, more OpenShift support. I know that's more Red Hat side, but so I'm not going to go into that. And then future development is really knocking out bugs and getting to a 1.0 release, getting everything stable. At the moment, we do have a few bugs in terms of provisioning volumes and PVCs. So if you have to have a persistent volume set up before you deploy your PVC. We need to basically improve the user experience in terms of that. That's it from me. That's really highlighting all the features that we have so far.
All right. Thank you. Any questions on Kcompose? All right. Do we have anybody on for AppController?
Yes. Hi.
Hello.
Can I start?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Maciej from Mirantis, from AppController team. So basically, last 2 weeks, the main accomplishment was finally getting working end-to-end tests, functional tests on Travis. So we'll hopefully land less bugs in and have more developer-friendly experience for anyone who wants to contribute. We also merged service account support for AppController like today, I think, and I think it's the last of the basic of native Kubernetes objects that we need to support. So I think in this regard, AppController is more or less complete. If you need any native Kubernetes object support in AppController, please file an issue. And I think that's it mostly. Oh, and also we are doubling down on our efforts to integrate with Helm, make AppController deploy Helm charts as part of Helm as part of the Helm install command. The integration was showcased several times here and on Helm developer stand-up, and the work is going on there, and that's it basically.
All right, thank you. Any questions on AppController? All right, then we have CNR. Do we have anyone on for CNR?
Yep, I can talk about CNR.
All right, great.
So I'm Jimmy from CoreOS. CNR stands for Container Native Registry, which is an attempt to create a standard registry API across the application package management tools that includes Helm, KPM, even Docker Swarm, and their DAB format. You can find reference implementation of code and everything we're working on at GitHub. Link I just pasted in chat. And so what's on the agenda for us is we're working on writing a spec, and we plan to present that in pieces at both the Helm DevSyncs and SIG Apps. And that is going to be a group effort. So if you're interested in contributing towards that, you can post it on the mailing list or shoot me an email. We also just demoed last week at SIG Apps. So Antoine presented our reference implementation and its Helm integration. So if you're interested in that, I'm pretty sure a video will be available shortly. So we've continued work internally at CoreOS to release a beta API implementation for Quay.io implementing this API. So then people will be able to like push and pull charts or like Docker DAB files to Quay.io. And then finally, if you're interested in accessing the beta Quay.io implementation, not the actual implementation, but the access to the service, you can shoot me an email, which is jimmy@CoreOS, or also post in our mailing list thread. So that's it.
All right, thank you. For anybody wondering, yes, we did have the demo last week. And if you have the notes up, I will paste another link in here to last week's episode. The recording is already available. And so you can jump over to YouTube and watch it if you like. And I just jumped the link into chat for anybody who wants to go look at that. And so the last stand-up we have before open discussion is Dayas Workflow. Do we have anybody on from Dayas Workflow to give us an update?
I can say something. You guys hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a lot to report. I guess something that Matt Fisher did a few months ago finally came to fruition, which is we upgraded the registry proxy over in Cube add-ons to be a little more battle tested, and we're using that now. Not much else to report. We do have something we want to demo for you guys, but it's probably going to take us another week or two, so enough said about that.
So you're looking to get a slot. We have open slots coming, not next week because we do have, we're taking it off for a holiday, but on February 27th. Do you think for the 27th, or our next open slot's actually on the March 6th? Do you think you'll have something for March 6th?
Certainly by either of those dates, yeah.
So I can put you down for March 6th for the, will you be giving it, Matt?
Probably Matt Fisher will, but I don't mean to put him on the spot, but yeah, I'm sure that'll work out. Let's do that.
All right. Well, I got you. I know we're scheduling on the fly here, but we'll say, I'll just say Matt demo because that's an easy way to do it.
Doesn't narrow it down around here.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. All right. So it is now on March 6th demo as the second demo. So be prepared. Or if you're not going to be, let me know. And I'll tag some of y'all just to remind you before it comes. All right. So thanks for the Dayas Workflow update. Now we've got about 15 minutes left. Do we have any open discussion topics? Anything we want to talk about? And by the way, next week, or I'm sorry, next time we meet, we will have time for a broader discussion. And one of the things that we have on the proposal is the aggregated API servers discussion, if that's still relevant. Because, you know, as we're going right now, we're kind of doing stand-ups and sharing one week, and then in-depth discussion in the following week, which in this case is 2 weeks out because we're skipping next Monday. So if you have something to suggest for that broader in-depth discussion that won't fit into the 15 minutes, feel free to suggest it now. But otherwise, the floor is open. Does anybody have anything they wanted to talk about?
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Did you have something you wanted to talk about?
Hi. This is Dilip.
Yeah.
I have one quick question about Helm. So, is there any known way of making Helm multi-tenant currently, or does it already support it?
I guess I would be the one to answer that question. Interesting you should ask, because that is the one feature we're going to really try and push into the 2.3 release, which is our next feature release. Work on that will begin this week. The one feature we're going to try and add in is a much better authentication and authorization component. And the idea there will be to allow you to specify things like RBACs that can be enforced on users' creation rights. And the goal of it is to make a very, very substantial step towards supporting multi-tenant configurations for Helm. Right now, there are people who are doing multi-tenant stuff, and it is possible, but it takes some very careful configuration with multiple tiller instances running. I mean, you can feel free to ask about that in the Slack room, and the people who have been working on that, I'm sure, will jump in. In fact, if anybody in this room now is one of those, please feel free to jump in. But that's going to be one of our major foci for the next 2.3, 2.4 releases.
That's great. Thanks. So is there any roadmap for Helms and charts? Is it there in the repository? I've not taken a look. I'm sorry to ask that now. But if there is anything, then okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things we learned from going through the incubator process is that there has to be a link from your README to your roadmap. So, and that'll get updated this week as we solidify what's going to go into the 2.3 release. And so, yeah, it's a good time to ask and a good time to jump in if you actually would like to weigh in on things and give your own input on what you're looking for and what your needs are.
That's great. Thanks for the info.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss? Any other questions, anything at all? All right, well, if we don't have anything, remember next week, March 20th, there is a U.S. holiday and a whole bunch of folks won't be able to make it, so we are canceling next Monday's meeting. We'll be back again on February 27th. So everyone, thanks for coming and have a wonderful couple weeks. Bye-bye.